All right. Hello, everybody. You guys type into the chat that you can hear me okay. I see Lawrence, I see Liz. And make sure everyone can hear me before we get started. Perfect. All good. Thank you. All right, you guys, who else is super excited for today's workshop? It's going to be a loaded workshop. I'm going to chat with you guys for about 10 minutes, and then I will bring Britt on. First thing I want you guys to do is type into the chat one area of your life or your health that has improved since you've joined the inner circle and started to do this work. I think it gets really easy on our quest for healing to focus on everything that isn't happening, everything that we don't have. So I want to spend just a minute today focusing on what is happening, because what we focus on, where we choose to put our energy and where we focus, expands. So take a second just to type into the chat one area of your life. It can be big or small, doesn't have to be massive. Just one area of your life or your health that has improved since you started doing this work. I'll take a second to jump in there and check it out. Ability to calm myself down with breathing. That's awesome. Foot pain is mostly gone, says Krista. I love that. I can absolutely relate to what chronic foot pain is like. It's torturous. General stress levels are lower. Love to hear it. More connected with others. Connection with others, less anxiety. My mind is calming down. I feel less rushed, less busy, more calm. Good. Less pain. These breathing exercises are causing my heart rate to go down and not feel like it's racing. A lot of you guys are using the breath work, which is awesome. That's the last workshop we did. Truly life-changing stuff that we're learning in here. Someone's fasting glucose and insulin has dropped dramatically. I love to hear it. Worrying is nearly gone. It's awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing. I know in my own healing journey, there was times where I just felt like if I hadn't achieved this level of healing that I was trying so hard to achieve, that nothing was working and it's all I could focus on. It was so frustrating. And what I didn't understand is where we choose to put our focus, what we choose to think about expands. And so it's really important just to make sure that even if that one thing that you're here to overcome, your gut issues, your back pain, your headaches, even if that one thing hasn't gone away, focus on what is going right during your journey, because that is often what switches our state, which we're going to get into here in a little bit, and unlocks our ability to heal. All right, so I've been seeing some awesome conversation in the Facebook group in the last couple of weeks. A lot of you in there sharing these breakthroughs, successes you're having, areas of your health that are improving. And then there's a lot of you in there sharing your frustration, your struggle, the fact that you're not yet where you want to be, you haven't yet broken through. And I want you to know, I know exactly what it's like to be in both camps. Exactly what it's like to feel the freedom and the excitement and the joy of feeling like this is finally working, something is finally working, and then also to feel the frustration and the despair and the hopelessness of feeling like this is just another thing that you've tried that isn't working. And I also know exactly what takes us from one camp to the other, from totally stuck and frustrated to free. And the number one barrier to healing that I see, the thing that kept me stuck, and thousands that I've coached since, if you're feeling stuck and you're here, I want you to listen up. Your stuckness right now, the fact that you haven't healed, is most likely not a result of this work that you're doing, the breathing, the trauma work that we're going to be doing, all the things we've learned up to this point. It is not because that stuff, those tools don't work. So it's not a question of whether or not what I'm sharing in here and all of these things that we're talking about work. The question is, are you implementing what we're learning, and not only implementing those things? Because it's not just about what we're doing. More importantly, have you changed why and how you're healing? In other words, have you changed your state of being? We talked a little bit about this in the beginning of the 6-part nervous system healing series, and how our state of being, our thoughts, our emotions, is what creates our symptoms. It's what our body is reflecting. We have to remember, when we're doing this work, it isn't just about what we're doing. It's about why we're doing it and how we're doing it. That is what our body is reflecting. So not only do we need to implement the tools that we're learning here, but we really have to look at that deeper stuff. Because without changing our state, healing is going to be really, really difficult. That was something that I lived for a very long time. We know that when we're stuck in survival, it causes nervous system dysregulation. And we know, we're all learning in here, that nervous system dysregulation is really at the core of most of our chronic health issues. It's why we have them, and it's why we're struggling to overcome them. It's why we struggle to heal. So when we come to this work and we approach our healing with the same approach that made us unwell, same thoughts, emotions, the same being stuck in survival, it makes so much sense why we struggle to heal. It's because we haven't changed why or how we're engaging in these healing practices. And many of you are still, mostly unconsciously, mostly happening on a subconscious level, doing this work, coming to the workshops, coming to these tools from a place of fear, still trying to fix, still avoiding, still escaping, which only perpetuates the undesirable state that we're in. Because as long as we're coming from a place of fear, and that's our why, I'm here because I have pain and I need to fix it, your body's going to reflect that. I want this to be really, really easy for you to understand, because without this piece, it's really difficult to heal. As long as you're using the tools that you're learning here to fix your symptoms, there's a really good chance that you'll remain stuck in a state of perceived danger. So this means that no matter how effective the therapy, the tool, the modality, the practices, the work that we're doing here, if we don't approach it with a mindset that unlocks healing, if we're continuing to approach it with the same mindset of fear and avoidance, it's going to be really hard to break free. And I'm really wanting to bring this to your attention now, because we're halfway through the 6-part series. We talked a little bit about this concept in the beginning, but so many of you, as I mentioned in that first workshop, will just go, okay, great. And you'll come back to using these tools. And again, on an unconscious level, your why and your how, your state of being still hasn't changed. And so you'll think, this isn't working for me. And what I want you to know is that it's not because you haven't found the right thing or the right tool. It's because your body is reflecting who you are right now, not who you're trying to become. Not understanding what I just shared there is what kept me stuck for years. For years, I struggled with this. Once I finally got to the point that I realized that most of my health issues were caused by nervous system dysregulation, and that it was at the core of my health issues. And then I also understood that unresolved trauma is one of the main contributors to nervous system dysregulation. I threw myself into all of the trauma healing. I work with some of the top trauma practitioners, literally trying, I don't even think I can list how many therapies and modalities I tried. Multiple therapists, helping with CBT, EMDR, brain retraining, a lot of somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, which we're going to do some today. I tried it all, multiple therapists, just thinking, okay, well, if nervous system dysregulation is at the core of my issues and trauma has contributed to this, then if I heal my trauma, then I'll heal. I got worse. My symptoms got worse. I was still coming to this work. I was still approaching the healing in the same state of survival, motivated by fear, and feeling like I just had to fix my trauma in order for my symptoms to go away. Trauma healing for me, just like trying to heal my gut, trying to balance my hormones, quickly became another thing that I needed to fix. Another distraction, another obsession that I had to do to be able to heal. And here's what I didn't understand, and I want all of you to understand, because I don't want you to do what I did. Doing any healing modality, no matter what it is, changing your diet, trying a different therapy, to fix your symptoms will make them worse, because it keeps your body stuck in a state of perceived danger, constantly communicating. I'm not safe. I'm not okay as I am. And you guys, this is brain science. This is stuff that I had to learn from years of trial and error. But I want you to know, if this is you, if this is resonating, if this has been your approach, no matter how amazing or effective the therapy, the modality, the guru is that you're learning from, you, like me, will continue to struggle to heal, because we can't heal from the same place of fear and fixing. We have to come to this work from a place of love and care for ourselves, rather than trying to fix what's broken, because all that does is perpetuate the dysregulation, which just leads to more symptoms. And I want you to know that a lot of this is happening below your conscious awareness, which is why I'm bringing it up again today. I had no idea this was going on. I want to give you a couple tangible examples, just so you might be able to recognize, like, have I not changed my why or my how? Have I not changed my state of being? A couple examples of this are using the breath work to calm your anxiety. And you might just think, well, isn't that what it's there for? Isn't that what the workshop was about? Breathing as a way to calm anxiety. If you're coming to the practice using it to avoid your anxious feelings, you will perpetuate them. If you're using any modality to heal you, to fix you, to avoid an undesirable symptom, you will perpetuate. Why? Because you're sending your body the signal, I'm not okay as I am. I need to avoid. I need to change my state. I need to do something to fix how I'm feeling. Any bit of avoidance is resistance, is motivation by fear. That's what the nervous system is going to reflect. And as long as the nervous system is stuck in a state of fear, you're going to get more symptoms. Making food choices. This is another really common example. Making food choices out of trying to avoid a flare or a symptom, like, oh, the last time I had this, and so every bit of what you are eating, what you're not eating, becomes a way to fix or avoid. Same thing, perpetuating the cycle of fear. Using trauma healing, you see this all the time, to make your chronic symptoms go away. Oh, I'm so excited. I saw you on Instagram. I have this back pain, these gut issues, this autoimmune that I cannot figure out how to cure. I haven't dealt with my trauma, and you're saying that trauma is a huge cause of these things. It absolutely is. But if you're coming here to this trauma workshop, to this work, using it conditionally, I have to fix my trauma in order to be okay. What you're sending yourself the signal is I'm not okay right now. Body cannot heal if there's a perceived danger. If there's a lack of safety, the nervous system cannot come into regulation. We have to bring the nervous system into regulation in order to heal. And this is why healing can be so tricky, not because we haven't found what will heal us, but we don't understand that how, the way that we're approaching our healing is literally the difference in whether or not you can heal. I can't overstate this enough. When we approach any healing tool with the goal of fixing something, which can happen unconsciously, you might even not know that you're doing it. Using these tools as a means to an end, this sends the brain a signal that you're not safe. And this is what the body reflects back to you, more dysregulation, leading to ongoing or more symptoms. When I was finally able to shift my why and how I was approaching my healing, I healed really quickly. I spent years and years doing all the things. And then when I was finally able to understand that why and how I was approaching my healing was more important than what I was doing, I healed quickly. When I stopped using the trauma healing and all the tools that were so effective to fix my symptoms, and instead just came to them from a place of genuine care for myself, just taking care of myself, that's when I started to heal. Changing my why and how is what changed my state of being. And that's what allowed my nervous system to finally feel safe. And this is what my body started to reflect as the symptoms started to dissolve. I finally became someone who was safe, regardless of whether my symptoms went away or not. I wasn't doing it anymore to get rid of my symptoms. And that alone was enough to move my body out of fight or flight, communicate safety, and then allow those symptoms to start to dissolve and fade away. Part of how I did this was learning to be with the sensation of alarm. What is trauma? What is nervous system dysregulation? What is anxiety? It's this state of alarm in your body. And I learned how to move toward it and sit with it rather than feel like I needed to fix it, breathe it away, trauma heal it away, exercise it away. I learned how to be with it. This shifted everything. And the same concept that I'm talking about is the thing. It's like the number one barrier to healing that I see. It's the thing that's keeping a lot of you from breaking free. Constantly searching for the next thing. A lot of you will go through the 6-part series. You won't understand this concept. You'll say, this didn't work for me. And you'll go out there and you'll look for another thing to fix you. When really what you need to do is change your why and your how and your state of being. Remove fear from the equation, because fear is what fuels all nervous system dysregulation. Fear is the fuel for all mind-body syndromes. Everyone is so busy looking for the most cutting edge, latest and greatest, the new thing, the new what? A new diet, a new protocol, a new healing regimen. That diet, that healing regimen will not work until you change your state. Your body can't even absorb those healthy nutrients from your new Whole30 diet, your new paleo diet, until you move out of fight or flight, until your decisions, what you're putting in your mouth, the healing tools that you're using are coming from a place of care for yourself rather than fear and fixing. So instead of searching for the next thing that's going to fix you in the next cutting edge protocol, just take a minute to re-examine your why and how, because this is what will actually allow your body to heal. Your body is a reflection of your state, and the fastest way to shift your health is to change your state. You can think of it as your energy, your frequency, your thoughts, your emotions, however you want to think about it. Your thoughts and emotions, your energy, the person you're being is having a massive impact on your health and your ability to heal. I want to say this one more time because it's so important. If there's one thing you take away, Our bodies are reflecting who we are right now, not who we're trying so hard to become. And just like anything I teach here, this trauma healing, without understanding this, can quickly become another thing to fix, another distraction. And if this is the case, this is why I'm bringing this up before the workshop. You might think, oh, trauma healing didn't work for me. You haven't changed your state. You haven't changed why you're coming to this work, and you haven't changed how you're engaging in this work. That's what your body's reflecting. Lastly, before we bring Britt on, I want you all to know that healing trauma does not have to be this super long, drawn out, painful, arduous process of walking through the weeds of your past and reliving all these painful memories and events. It doesn't have to be that way. You'll heal really quickly once you change your why and your how, and you learn to be with the pain that's there and stop avoiding and escaping from it. A renowned trauma expert, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, Gabriel Maté, says healing trauma isn't about revisiting the events themselves. It's about healing how those events have impacted the nervous system. The focus is not on reliving the past, but on addressing the lasting effects that trauma had on the body and the mind, and working to restore the balance and regulation of the nervous system. It's so powerful. We can't change what happened, but there's so much we can do to heal. All right, let me see if I can find Britt here. And we will bring her on. Britt, if you want to raise your hand, I think you're in the attendees over here somewhere, so I'm not seeing you. Oh, there she is. Perfect. All right, Britt, you should be able to turn yourself on here. Let me search for you. There she is. All right, Britt.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Let's see.
Can't see your screen yet.
Yeah, it's not showing me that option.
Okay.
The chat, lower hand, Q&A, and that's all I'm seeing in my menu bar.
Let me make you host here. Okay, just brought you over as a panelist, so we should be able to see you here in a second.
It just says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, I made you a co-host, so you should pop up.
Ah, there we go.
There you are. Hello, my friend.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're so busy.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to spend time with your community today.
We are so excited. I want to just give you a little introduction for those of you, I think a lot of my community follows you on Instagram, but for those that don't, Britt is truly, I follow a lot of different trauma experts, most of them I would say on Instagram, and Britt is truly, in my opinion, one of the best there is. She has such a way of explaining a pretty complex stuff and just breaking it down and making it so relatable. And she has a really inspiring story of her own. And I think we would all agree that it seems like the best experts, the ones who have this gift of communicating, are always the ones that have walked the path themselves. And she's the perfect example of this. She's gone through a lot in her life and chosen to take her pain and her story and turn it into her purpose. And she is changing so many lives. And we're so lucky to get to hang out with her. And she's also writing a book, which is super exciting. So Britt, I'm going to have you just take it away. I'll probably turn my screen off here and have you close things up at the end. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Everyone is super excited to learn from you today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would love it if you would introduce me at every program that I do. That would be fantastic. Your words are really so sweet. And I feel just the absolute same way about you. I love the work that you're doing. So I'm sure that the people that are here in this space are just fantastic.
There's
Okay.
there's a lot of amazing people here. So thank you so much. I'll pop off here.
Awesome. Okay, I am going to get the share screen going here, everyone. So give me just a moment while I get the presentation started. All right. Okay, and I just want to make sure, can we all see the presentation just big and loud, one slide? We're good? Okay, awesome. I will say that my style of presenting is I can get really easily distracted because I'm really passionate about answering questions, which is why our weekly Q&A calls in my program, which are supposed to be an hour long, usually go an hour and a half. So I will just say that if you have questions, I'm going to be saving time for the very end. So if you pop those in the chat, just know if I'm not answering them during the program or the workshop, it's not because I don't want to, it's just because I'm going to save those for the very end. Okay, so hello, hi, I am Britt Piper. I am on social media. If you do follow me as Heal with Britt. And I like to always share just some random facts about myself, just to kind of humanize this experience and honestly just get myself and my system a little bit more comfortable. So random facts, I look like I'm 18 years old, but I'm going to be 36 actually this month. I'm a wife. I am a mother to two young children, which is the most beautiful and also terrifying experience. I have a 4-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter, and I have a fur child, of course. I have a Siberian Husky. I currently live in Texas. I'm kind of from all over, but we landed here in Dallas, Fort Worth because of a job, and we love it here. I have traveled, worked, and lived on 3 continents in 27 countries. And when I eat cupcakes, I like to tear off the bottom and put it on top of the icing. And if you know what I'm talking about, you're my kind of people. So listen, today's conversation, obviously we're talking about a topic that a lot of us can probably resonate with, relate to. Statistics and research provides that the majority of us have experienced some form of trauma in our lifetime. And so if at any point you feel like you need to take a step out, we're not going to get into any graphic details of trauma today, but of course, anything you need to do to tend to your system, I would definitely encourage it. One thing that I might suggest is maybe to have what I would call a kinesthetic orienting object. So something that you can touch, something that you can really explore with your senses, that brings a sense of comfort, okayness, or what we could call safety to you. So for me, I always have these little rocks on hand. These are stones that I picked out of a lake in Montana from Avalanche Lake, which is one of my favorite hikes in the world. And anytime when my system starts to feel really activated and I just need a little bit of support, I'll sometimes just hold these rocks and explore them. Okay, so if you need to do any kind of resourcing while you're here in the program, I would definitely encourage that. All right, so let's jump into it. Hi, I'm Britt. We'll kind of talk about like the technical details and then we'll get into a little bit more of my story. So I am a somatic and trauma trained practitioner. I'm an educator with 12 plus years experience in facilitating sexual violence prevention programs, trauma-informed trainings for a diverse range of organizations, including the US military. I was actually at Fort Campbell yesterday in Nashville, well, not Nashville, in Kentucky, Department of Justice, universities, and international crisis centers. I am the creator of the internationally recognized Body First Healing Program, which is a 6-month hybrid live and self-paced group program, which provides a trauma recovery roadmap to somatically heal the nervous system, get unstuck, and build resilience. It is a program that was created 7 years ago and has had hundreds and hundreds of clients since. So the philosophy that guides my work is based on my own personal recovery, research and training, and 10,000 plus collective hours within the trauma space. So as Kate had mentioned, I'm also a soon-to-be international author of the book here, The Body First Healing. This book cover has not been revealed, so I'm letting you all in on a little bit of a sneak peek for it. But I think that one thing I wanted to share with you all, and maybe what you can get just as a bit of a tone setter for the workshop today. So my book is being published by a small publishing company called Avery under Penguin Random House. And Avery is known for working with leading edge experts and paradigm disruptors. Some of the more notable authors that they've worked with is James Clear, Atomic Habits, Dr. Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal, and Good Energy, most recently from Dr. Casey Means. So if that gives you any insight, if you've read any of these books, you know that these books really challenge the cultural norms around the topics that these people are experts in. And so today you're going to hear a different discussion about what trauma is, what it isn't, and how we can start to heal in a really effective way. And then just lastly, to give you some insight into kind of my professional credentialing background. So I have an expertise in somatic experiencing, polyvagal theory, internal family systems, attachment, developmental trauma, complex PTSD, chronic illness, and more. Okay, so outside of my resume, okay, kind of as Kate mentioned, you know, I think a lot of people that come to the work that they do it because their heart is in it, because they've been down that path themselves. And that was definitely my experience. I can go through all of the research that I've done, all of the credentialing, all of my trainings and my work over the past 15 plus years. But I think that the most important and most informed part of my work is centered in my own research, my own journey. So to give you some insight, I just want to take it back here for a moment. So in 2011, at the age of 22, I made a phone call home that no child ever really wants to make. I called my parents from jail. You probably were not expecting that. And my dad answered the phone, and I told him that I had been arrested and that I was charged with 3 counts of battery on an officer with injury and 1 count of resisting arrest. Now, what sticks with me to this day isn't the disappointment in his voice, but the fear. The fear, as he said, if you don't learn how to stop running from your pain, avoiding it, then you are literally going to kill yourself. And he was right. Now, fast forward, and I know I said 2011, I meant 2009 is when I called him. Fast forward to 2011, 2 years later. No, I'm sorry. 2011 is when I found myself in that jail cell. Now, a few days later, I went before a judge, and she remembered who I was. She remembered me as the girl who had experienced a very public sexual assault, very public in the sense that it was covered closely by the media. I was sexually assaulted by a stranger who helped me change my flat tire. And following a 2-year grueling, highly publicized trial process, he was sentenced ultimately to 60 years behind bars. So this judge knew who I was. And she reminded me of that. She said, "You're the survivor from that sexual assault case," to which I responded, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She said, "We're going to drop the charges, but she said, you need to learn to live with your pain better." And it was the same thing that my dad had said, right? When I called him on the phone, he said, "We're not bailing you out." You see, she didn't say you need to learn to get past your pain. You need to learn to get over your pain. She said you need to learn to live with your pain. And that was really, I think, the turning point in my healing. Up until that point, I had seen therapists the majority of my life. I had seen conventional therapists and was really struggling and kind of stuck on this hamster wheel of medications and talk therapy. So up until then, I had struggled for nearly 15 years navigating the debilitating symptoms of my past traumas. So symptoms that included very extreme anxiety, anger, depression, substance abuse, and more. And I was really stuck in this survival mode. And I felt that I had hit a dead end with these Band-Aid approaches of traditional talk therapy and medications. You name the medication for any kind of mental illness, mental health disorder. I had all of the diagnoses and I was on all of the medications. But at some point, I felt like I just kept hitting a wall. In many ways, I felt that I was regressing. Self-sabotaging behaviors, they took over my health, my relationships, my finances, and more. And I felt defeated, and I succumbed to the I'll always be broken mentality. I was truly living a life of surviving. I was stuck in coping cycles of substance abuse, eating disorders, unhealthy relationships, severe anxiety attacks that would leave me home for days, and depression and suicidal ideation. And that is how I ended up in that jail cell. Now, my healing after that pivotal moment, after switching to a body first approach in healing and regulating my nervous system, my entire life changed. And I'm going to share with you kind of what the light bulb moment was for me to really prompt this change. So after switching to a more nervous system centered and body approach, I no longer felt stuck in cycles of survival. I was able to begin to free myself from the anger and the grief that my nervous system was keeping me stuck in. And I experienced presence, peace, and stability in my relationships, my health, and career for the first time. And I finally had the tools to navigate life's difficult moments rather than running from them without relying on a doctor or pills to manage the discomfort. Now, to give you some context, the night that I was arrested, this was 30 days after the trial sentencing came to an end. And I had been out with a boyfriend who was drinking and driving. And I always say that should give you a very good indication of where I was at that time in my life. He was pulled over, arrested. And when the police officers went to pull me out of the car, in my impaired state, I had a flashback, what we call a trauma reenactment of the night of my assault, of a strange man touching me in a car, and my nervous system went right back into the fight response that I could not complete back then. And as I sat in that jail cell for those 3 days, because my parents didn't bail me out before going to see the judge, I remember sitting in that 6x8 jail cell, and there were no pills, there was no alcohol. I always get emotional talking about this moment. There was no pills, no alcohol, no toxic relationships, no distractions. There was nothing between me and the pain that I had been running from my entire life. And it wasn't just the assault. It was the loss of my brother in a car accident. It was an incredibly dysfunctional upbringing. It was being in foster care. It was being taken from my mother at birth forcibly. It was trauma in the womb. I had been running from the discomfort and the pain and the grief in my body for so many years. But in that jail cell, I was forced to sit with it, to sit in it. And although there were moments of shuddering and shaking and wailing and sweating and crying, and I thought that I was sometimes, at some points, I was literally going to die, I came out of that jail cell feeling like an entirely new person. Getting emotional. And I knew when I left that something had changed in me. Something had drastically shifted and transformed in my body. And so I got curious, and that took me down this very long path of research and me search. What happened in that jail cell? And I happened to fall upon the work of Dr. Peter Levine and other somatic therapists and body-centered practitioners, and the work of, I'm looking at my bookcase here, the work of Dr. Stephen Porges at the Polyvagal Institute and Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. And I realized that there was a big piece of the pie missing from my healing, and that was the body. So that's what really prompted that shift for me. And what I found shortly after changing to this kind of work is that I was living in peace, presence, I had potential. I was able to coexist with the trauma. Just like that judge said, you need to learn to live with your pain. And my dad said the same thing. And difficult moments. And I allowed those moments to soften me, not harden me, and guide me, but not define me. In less than 6 months, I was able to identify and begin to heal the root cause of my symptoms through the body and nervous system. And what I had done up until that point was just focus on symptom management, which is so much of what we see in the allopathic world today. These Band-Aid approaches of, well, just stop drinking, right? And that will fix all your problems, or just stop taking the pills and the drugs and that will change your life. And these behavior modifications only got me so far until I fell back into another kind of coping pattern that was more extreme than the last. Finally, through regulating my nervous system, I was able to walk away from a long-term unhealthy relationship, decades of substance abuse, mental health diagnoses, and an eating disorder, and more. And it's in this experience that I began to strongly believe that and realize and experience for myself that we were brilliantly and beautifully designed to self-heal without having to rehash the painful past or settle for surface level fixes. And that's a lot of what I'm going to lead you into today. So when I get into this work and I talk very passionately about, body first, body-based healing, and just how profound it can be. The question that I often get, or when, I work with clients and after some time, they experience such incredible impact from the work. They'll ask the question, why don't we talk about this? Why isn't it taught? Why haven't I heard about it? And first of all, I just want to say that it takes on average roughly 20 years for science and research to reach mainstream medical practice. Okay, somatic experiencing in particular, which is what I'm going to be talking about a little bit today, was developed and created by Dr. Peter Levine back in the 1970s. Actually, that's when his research began. And it's really starting to hit the mainstream now. Okay, so that's part of it. Another part of it is because of the emotional toxins. Okay, so emotional toxins are making us sick. We often talk about environmental toxins, and this is a really big conversation that we're having in the world today, right? The air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the water that we drink. But what else creates toxicity within the body? Unprocessed emotions. There's a reason why we say that emotions come with emotional charge, because when we feel emotions, there is a physiological, hormonal cascade of events that happens. When we experience things like fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, sadness, shame, there is a flow of adrenaline and cortisol that is seeped into the body through the HPA axis. And when that happens, if not felt, if not experienced, if not expressed and expelled ultimately from the body, then that charge remains stuck within the body, creating emotional toxicity, just like environmental toxins do. And these emotional toxins are making us sick. There are many reasons why chronic illness is on the rise. My way of looking at it is we are simply living in a world that our nervous system doesn't want to live in anymore, that our nervous system isn't prepared to live in. So somatic and nervous system healing, it's different because it postures us to actually look inward and to rely on the innate biological systems that are built within our biology to reorganize, regenerate, and regulate and heal. So that is why somatic experiencing, again, is referred to as a naturalistic approach. Somatic experiencing doesn't diagnose. It doesn't prescribe. It doesn't tell you that you are wrong. Somatic experiencing tells you that everything about you makes perfect sense, that your responses, your behaviors, your feelings, the sensations, the emotions, everything in your life makes complete sense based on the circumstances that you're in. These are natural responses to an unnatural or an overwhelming experience or event or environment that you're living in. So we are systematically taught, though, that emotions are bad. And we're going to get into this today, that our mind is king and in charge, and that our body is a burden to always be fixed, right? And as Kate was talking about earlier, right? The diets. I mean, you look at any magazine, right? Any commercial, how often are they trying to sell us back our own healing and our own healing modalities, right, that are already provided and built within. So as I was saying here, we're taught that emotions are bad, that our mind is king, that our body is a burden to be fixed, while simultaneously discarding and overriding the ancient and instinctual wisdom that allows us to live in wholeness, and that's through the body. By keeping us out of our bodies and in our minds, we are disconnected from the very thing that heals us best. And by the way, the sick care industry is big business, as we know, right? So what is trauma? I think that this is an important part to really start the conversation now that I've kind of teed it up, right? A really important place to start. What is trauma? Okay, so trauma can easily be defined as any event or experience that is either too much, too fast, too soon, or not enough for the nervous system to cope with. Oftentimes when we think about trauma, we have this immediate thought of shock trauma, which is what we call acute trauma. It's a single event that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. This is an assault, a loss, an accident, an injury. But there's other trauma as well that we don't often discuss that actually leaves oftentimes more deeper and indelible and harmful imprints. So there's also chronic trauma, okay? Chronic trauma is not an event, but it's an experience that lasts over time. It doesn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. These are cycles, experiences like neglect, abuse, being in a chaotic environment, growing up in an environment where there was dysfunction or a lot of dysregulation, where there wasn't attention, attunement, and proper attachment that's needed for bonding and proper development of the nervous system, right? So that's where some of that not enoughness comes in that often gets overlooked. So in this regard, okay, I want to talk really quickly about how trauma comes back as those indelible imprints that I was talking about. So you might have heard of the book, The Body Keeps a Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And in this book, he famously says that trauma doesn't come back as a memory, it comes back as a reaction. Okay, when the nervous system experiences anything that's too much, too fast, too soon, or not enough, what happens is the system then gets stuck in that survival response. Okay, so in my experience, what happened, for instance, with my assault, okay, there was a moment where I was in the car and I was overpowered by my perpetrator from the right-hand side. But my nervous system actually went into a fight response and I tried to fight back and defend myself. We call this a defensive orienting response. My body was overpowered and my nervous system was overpowered. And so what followed in that 2-year period between the assault and the final trial date was I became a completely different version of myself. I was angry. I was full of rage. I was violent. And that was completely out of my nature. Anyone who knew me, they knew Brittany as like this soft, gentle-natured person up until that point. I became someone that I did not recognize. And this was my nervous system trying to survive, trying to complete the response that was too overwhelming back then to complete. So I became stuck in that fight response. And this is the reaction that kept coming back up in my daily life. Now, Stephen Porges, who is the developer of the polyvagal theory, which is the newest theory of the nervous system, the upgraded science. I was trained under Porges at the Polyvagal Institute. He says that trauma is not an event, it's a response. Right, so we see some similarities here. It doesn't come back as an event or as a memory. It comes back as a reaction or a response. And again, that is the response of the nervous system trying to complete what happened back then, here in the present. Dr. Peter Levine, the developer of somatic experiencing, said trauma isn't found in the event, it's found in the nervous system. I think where we picking up on the pattern here. Dr. Gabor Mate, he says trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. Again, it's not the memory, it's not about the story or the event, it's about how it's living in you today and showing up today. And this is the difference between implicit and explicit memory. Implicit memory, actually, let me start with explicit memory. So explicit memory is memory that you can explain. That was the easiest way that I remembered it back in the day. Explicit memory is memory that you can explain, that you can put into words. This is known as verbal memory or declarative memory, narrative memory. And this is the memory that we commonly think about when we think about memory formation. Okay, so memory consolidation is who, what, where, when, why, and that's what we commonly think about, right? We can take it in, we can store it within the brain, the hippocampus. The hippocampus can then retrieve it and then provide it for recall. Now, implicit memory is different. Implicit memory is the memory of the body. This is nonverbal memory. And this can be seen in impulse memory, okay, muscle memory, right? Like when we brush our teeth or when we ride a bike, we're not thinking about who, what, where, when. There's no time constraint to it. Implicit memory is also emotional memory, right? We might be hearing a song and all of a sudden we're taken back to those emotions of that one time that when that one thing happened. Excuse me, it's also sensory memory. So maybe you're in a cafe and you smell something and all of a sudden you're taken back to grandma's kitchen when she used to make those one cookies. Implicit memory is the memory of the body. And this is where procedural memory lives. And procedural memory is the impulses and instincts of the body and the nervous system. Okay, the way that we commonly run away from things, the way that we shut down when people are talking loudly to us. That's a memory from the past, right? This is a memory being played out here in the present. For example, when we talk about attachment, which is the relationship, the attunement that you have with your caregivers in your first 3 years of life, my implicit memory of eye contact comes up from my attachment years. I was separated from my mother at birth, and when I was reunited with my mother, she was very distant. And so she didn't have eyes that were available for nurturing, for soothing, for loving, for comfort. She was distant. She wasn't there. And so I learned as a baby that it's not safe to look into the eyes of others because that brings with it a sense of danger, right? Of not being taken care of not being tended to. And so for me, I see that show up in relationships, or I did see that show up until I started doing eye work, stabilization eye work. But I saw that show up in my relationships with others. I would look down, right? Whenever people were talking to me, or I'd look down to the left. I would never look up. I wouldn't ever look them in the eye. And if I looked them in the eye, there would be the puttering of my heart, the heat, the sweat, the fear, the terror that they're going to leave or they're going to reject me. And even as I'm saying that now, I'm feeling a little bit of sensation. There will be times throughout the program, I just want to tell you that emotion and sensation comes up for me and I don't try and push it down. I feel like, modeling by example is best. So I'm noticing in this moment that there are tears forming behind my eyes. And even as I'm talking about this rejection, my body is sensing it and feeling it. Right? So that's the difference between explicit and implicit memory. And trauma is predominantly stored as implicit memory, just like all of these statements by the top researchers in the world provide. Trauma comes back as a memory in the body. And when it comes to memory in the mind, it comes back either as what we call a flashbulb memory, which is a very intense moment, a fragmented memory, which is a blur, or no memory at all until it might flood back. But although we might not remember what happened, our body still remembers how it felt. The implicit memory of our past experiences are always there, even if we can't remember what happened explicitly, and they are always showing up in our present day. This is why the science behind trauma in the womb, utero trauma, trauma at birth, and nonverbal trauma, which is what we call developmental trauma, is incredibly compelling. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So if trauma comes back as a response or reaction, this is how it comes back. And we often, what I've heard over many, many years of doing this work is people come to me and say, I feel stuck. I'm stuck in the same cycles, the same patterns, the same behaviors, the same thought patterns, the same emotions, the same symptoms, the same feelings in my body, and I can't get out of it. And when we say we're stuck, what we're talking about is our physiology, the nervous system stuck in the residual survival of the past. So, and Peter Levine, he has a wonderful quote that says that trauma is an internal straitjacket, internal, when a devastating moment leaves us frozen in time, right? So our nervous system is stuck in the past. And we can get stuck in these kinds of personalities that don't feel natural to who we are, right? So if we're stuck in the fight response, we might experience more chronic defensiveness, explosiveness, irritability. The flight response is that mobilizing response of busyness, escapism. I'm going to distract. I'm going to work a lot. I'm going to be perfect, right? The emotional imprint of this is typically anxiety, panic, fear, and worry. The shutdown response, which is the newest term for the freeze response, is where we start to feel spacey, maybe lazy, exhausted, numb, and isolated. This is the state of disconnection. Here, the emotional imprint is helplessness, hopelessness, shame, and depression. The fawn response, which is a blended response, a blended state, which we'll talk about in a little bit. This is where we tend to chronically people please, be agreeable, have no boundaries. This is often led by the emotions of fear, anxiety, insecurity, and shame. And then there's functional freeze. Functional freeze, I feel like, is so prevalent in our world today where we are so fast-paced and so emotionally disconnected that this has become a norm. Functional freeze is another blended state, but this is where we are in a little bit of a flight response, right? So we have anxiety, kind of those go, 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 perfectionism tendencies, but we have very little emotion. So we're also in a bit of a shutdown state. So on the outside, we can look strong, resilient, like we have it together. We muscle through life. We're calm with the cool waters all the time, but we're emotionally numb and on autopilot. And we often experience dissociation within the body. Okay, so think of the Tin Man, right? We go through life with no emotion. So we're flowing, but with no emotions. So this quote by Gabor, every human has a true, authentic self, right? The part of us that's under that armor of the nervous system or of a chronic dysregulated nervous system. Trauma is the disconnection from it, and healing is the reconnection to it. So I often say that trauma is rediscovering who you were before the pain of the past told you who to be. And that's really what healing is, right? And healing, by the way, we do this for the rest of our lives. We don't just show up one day and everything is different and we're healed and there's some big transformation. Healing is more so about unlearning some of those protective patterns that were once self-protective in nature, but over time have become self-sabotaging because they're not necessary anymore. You can think about it how maybe an operating system or these management strategies maybe just need a little bit of fine-tuning and some updating. Okay, so rediscovering who we were before the pain told us who to be. Now, this is incredibly important. I'm going to show you here the nervous system ladder. Okay, but I know that you guys talk about the nervous system a lot here, so I'm assuming you probably know what the nervous system ladder is, but if you don't, I'm going to give just a brief overview, and I, of course, have my polyvagal flip chart. So the nervous system ladder, the old framework of the nervous system, the old science looked at the nervous system as if it was a teeter-totter, okay? And what we now look at the nervous system as, where it was, parasympathetic rest and digest, or sympathetic fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze, okay? But the upgraded research from Dr. Stephen Porges provides that the nervous system is actually three hierarchical states, okay? Three distinct states. And it can be described by being on this ladder. So at the top of the ladder is when we're in our not regulated state. This is because moving up and down the ladder is regulation. This is when we're in our state of what we call ventral, okay? Kind of our rest and digest state. This is the ventral vagal state, the parasympathetic vagal state or ventral state. Here we feel rested, we feel social, we feel present, hopeful, creative, and our body is sensing into these neuroceptive cues of safety. So neuroception is the body's way of sensing into our environment. Okay, it's called our threat detecting machine, and it's always sensing for cues through the senses of either safety or danger. So am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe? And this neuroception happens in our subconscious mind, okay, outside of our mind's conscious awareness. So it happens through the body and we don't realize it's happening. And it happens in three places: inside, outside, between. So it's happening internally in our body, right? Is my body safe right now? Do I feel safe in my body? No, my heart is doing this. Or wait, I'm feeling the tension in my viscera, in my stomach again, or that back pain is back, right? So it's sensing inside for cues of safety or danger, and safety would be Oh, there's ease in my muscles. I can breathe today. I feel settled. There's expansion, there's warmth and joy. Okay. So inside, outside in your environment, am I safe or not safe? And between you and other nervous systems. Okay. So this is happening. This neuroception is happening all of the time outside of our mind's awareness. So here is where we feel safe. Now, as we start to feel unsafe, okay, as triggers arise or cues of danger, then our system, and these are perceptions of danger, the system will start to come down into a predictable response. The first response is your sympathetic response of fight or flight. Okay, and when this happens, hormones of adrenaline, cortisol, and other survival hormones are released through the body to initiate us and to mobilize us to fight or flee. The blood motility of the body moves outward to the limbs, which is why we feel red and heated and sweaty, okay, to mobilize us. So here, if we're in a fight response, we'll feel angry, frustrated, annoyed, irritable. If we're in a flight response, we'll feel fear, worry, anxiety, okay? And here the neuroception is danger. Now, if fighting or fleeing is not an option, or if whatever we're experiencing is too overwhelming for the system to cope with, then what will happen is we will then come down to our third and final state, which is our dorsal vagal complex. This is the state of shutdown, which we used to think of as freeze. Okay, but here we're in a parasympathetic state. This is a state of conservation. Okay, this is disconnection. So at the top, it's connection. In the middle, it's protection. At the bottom is disconnection. We retreat into our turtle shells. We isolate, we disconnect from the world, we disconnect from others, and we disconnect from our own bodies. Everything slows down to the slowest possible speed so that we can go into hibernation. The blood motility of the body moves from the limbs now into the core to keep our vital organs warm for survival, for hibernation. So this is why we feel cold. This is why we feel low energy. This is why we feel fatigue. This is why we feel exhausted and depleted. But what is interesting and really important to note here is that all of that adrenaline and cortisol from the fight or flight response is still within the system. And that still has to be released. So even though we're down in dorsal still has a lot of energy below the surface. Unfortunately, we can't Spider-Man our way from the very bottom to the top, although that would be nice. So what we have to do is actually move up the ladder. And this is what we call regulating, upregulating. We have to allow ourselves to move back up through that initiated fight or flight response to discharge or release those emotions from the body. Not those emotions, I'm sorry. Those hormones from the body. Okay. So when we feel stuck, we are literally stuck. Okay. Those survival hormones become stuck within the body. We get locked into what we call the stress response cycle. And when we are stuck there, we can get either stuck in those chronic states of fight or flight, or we can get stuck down at the very bottom, or we can oscillate between the two, very rarely seeing those moments of ventral. Now, I also want to say that a regulated nervous system is not one that's up in ventral all day long. That is not what regulation looks like. The definition of regulation is actually a flexible nervous system, one that has flow, one that can go up and down this ladder all day long, probably roughly 100 times a day, without getting stuck. And it's important to say that because I think often when we experience fear or anxiety or shutdown or I'm tired, we think that something is wrong with us. That is a natural response of the body to ride the waves of activation, stress hormones throughout the day. Your body is doing what it naturally needs to do to metabolize and digest those hormones. So getting unstuck, okay, somatic healing allows you to experience the body. This is and this is why it's in its name, right? Soma means body oriented. It means of the body. So somatic experiencing, the whole goal is to get you into your body, not to get you to fix your body, as Kate was mentioning, fix your body. There's something wrong with your body. Get out of your body, calm your body. No, we want you to experience what is happening in the body because it's natural. The anger, the fear, the helplessness, the shutdown, the I'm dissociated, the I feel numb, the sorrow, the shame, everything is a natural response to some kind of trigger. And the more that we can experience it rather than resist it, Peter always says what we resist in the body will just persist. Because when we resist it, what it does is it creates more stress hormones within the body. Okay, I'm going to resist that pain. I'm going to resist this, or I'm going to fear it. We call this interrelational focusing. Okay, when we focus on the relationship that we have with that symptom, right? I don't want to experience it. Oh, wait, it's going to come back. Or, oh, I have to go outside today and see that bright light. And when I see bright light, I'm going to get migraines. And what that does is you're now priming the body, the viscera, and you're creating anticipation and more stress hormones. And those stress hormones then creates more of the fight or flight response, which then creates more of the muscle response, right? The bracing, more pain. So instead, we don't resist the experience of the body. We allow ourselves to gently dip our toes into that experience in a way that feels tolerable. And we'll talk about this in a moment. Okay. We experience the body, which then naturally comes an expression of the body follows. And then that's where through expression, some kind of expression, whether it's shaking, trembling, crying, okay, sometimes it's just sweat, okay, that is then how the survival energy or the hormones of adrenaline and cortisol are then expelled from the body. Okay, so we expel what is keeping you stuck, stagnant, and sick in survival mode. And when that happens, that's then how we rise up the ladder, okay, and build resilience. So your healing so far, okay, might look like this. This is what mine looked like, okay? When you have unhealed trauma, you can think of your nervous system as a flawed security system. Remember I said neuroception earlier. Am I safe? Not safe. Safe, not safe. Constantly alarming for danger or threat, the unprocessed trauma from the past, when it's no longer there. It gets stuck and stagnant survival hormones keep you living in chronic physiological states of survival, fight, flight, freeze, which wreaks havoc on your emotional, physical, and mental health. Okay, so this shows up as the hamster wheel of the things that we help to just manage the symptoms. Okay, self-sabotaging behaviors, which were once adaptive coping responses, right? Self-protective responses that were probably needed in the past, but now have overstayed their welcome and have turned into self-sabotaging or maladaptive coping patterns. And we're stuck in survival mode. Now, this also creates physical changes within the body. Okay, so each nervous system state comes with a very clear and defined neuroanatomical response in the body. So each state comes with a certain set of digestive imprints. There's hormone balancing that happens. There's a certain kind of heart rate variability that happens in different states. Immune function becomes impacted. Blood motility, as I mentioned, our musculoskeletal system. The nervous system oversees our visceral function, our postural attitude, the way that we carry our posture, our sensory processing, reproduction, respiration, body temperature, and more. The nervous system governs and oversees from the reptilian brain and the limbic mammalian brain, the basic functions of the body. Okay, it is the operating system. Now, the old way, okay, you'll never heal your trauma and get unstuck from the past by simply talking about the past. And here is why. The language of the nervous system is sensation, feeling, emotion, and impulse. It's important to note that the nervous system operates or lives from the subconscious subcortical part of the brain. We have the reptilian brain, which is the brainstem, and this is where our impulses and our instincts are. Just think of a reptile, a lizard, right? Very instinctual, right? Looking around, darting, freezing, jumping, I don't know. And then the midbrain, which is the limbic system or the mammalian brain, is the second part of that subconscious brain. And this is the emotional feeling brain, okay? The top part of the brain is the neocortex. This is the human cognitive thinking brain. The nervous system does not operate from the cognitive brain. It predominantly operates from the subconscious subcortical part of the brain. Therefore, the language of the nervous system is sensation, feeling, emotion, and impulse. Okay, so a subcortical system, nonverbal, requires subcortical processing. We have to show. We have to show through experience, through somatic experience, not tell our nervous system that we are safe. An example of this, let's say there's an Army veteran who's sitting in his house in Michigan watching Seinfeld, and he hears a loud bang from outside and it's a car going by. And the next thing you know, he's in the corner crouched down like this. His nervous system took over, the body took over. And even though he knows rationally in his cognitive mind, I'm home, I'm in Michigan, I'm watching my favorite show, his body is saying otherwise. The nervous system operates through body and sense, the felt sense. Further, talking about the past is proven to exasperate your nervous system responses, therefore worsening your system or worsening your symptoms. Okay, so that is why, well, I might get into that in a minute. Now, this carries on into why a body-first approach is so important when it comes to trauma recovery. So we often say in the somatic space, our golden rule is that your state creates your story. The nervous system state that you're in is going to create the stories, the thoughts in your mind. Dr. Joe Dispenza often says that the body is the subconscious mind. Okay, the body is the subconscious mind. Wherever your nervous system state is at, your subconscious and conscious thoughts are going to mirror that. If you're in a fight response, you're going to be mad at everybody. You're going to be mad at the TV. You're going to be mad at the weather. You're going to be mad at your kids. You're going to be mad at the dog, right? And there's no amount of positive thinking, affirmations, change your thoughts, change your life that can override the ancient wisdom of the nervous system. In addition, updated science provides that healing should follow a combination approach, okay, whereby you begin first with the body and the nervous system. That's why my book, that's why my program has always been called Body First Healing, not body only. Okay, and why is this important? Well, the vagus nerve, okay, the updated science on the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It's known as the information superhighway. And what we have found is that 80% of those messages course from body to brain, and only 20% of the messages, known as afferent fibers, communicate from brain down to body. In other words, your body is in the driver's seat. Your body has a lot more say than the brain, the conscious cognitive brain, when it comes to your thought patterns, your behaviors, your emotions, how you feel in the world and in your relationships. Your body is in the driver's seat. Now, the top-down approach to trauma, okay, focuses on the neocortex up at the top and works its way down. Okay, so if I were to, I know it's kind of small, the top-down approaches to trauma starts from the neocortex. In some cases, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive, can help you to change your thoughts and replace them with more positive thoughts and behaviors. Okay, the bottom-up approach starts from the bottom. Trauma triggers physical responses, impulses, instincts, reactions, muscle bracing, right? Tension, holding patterns. It shuts down the higher functioning parts of the brain that are rational. So when you experience trauma, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, okay? The amygdala, which is the fear or the threat center of the brain, it's a little almond-shaped structure that's located in the midbrain, the limbic system, that takes over as the new operating system, okay? Working bottom up starts with the body and the fight or flight response to process emotion and the charge, the physiological charge that comes with it, okay? But a combination approach is important. So you start with regulating the body, the nervous system, and then you work with the meaning making. So the new way, regulating your nervous system through the body is the first step to healing trauma, not talking about it. All right. In other words, true healing happens when you get out of your head and into your body. Okay. Now, I want to talk really quickly here about the stress response cycle. And I had mentioned this earlier. Okay. And this is where a lot of us are stuck. So in some ways, you can see this, we go up and down the ladder. But the stress response cycle is also another way of kind of visualizing this. Okay, so we start up at the top in neutral. We're fine. We're at the top of the ladder. There's no neuroceptive cues of danger. There's no triggers inside, outside, between. We feel safe. And then there's a trigger and we go into activation, right? We're mobilized into fight or flight. The system is then inundated. The body is inundated through the HPA axis with those survival hormones, right? We're mobilized, we're moving, there's heat, there's sweat, there's tension. And what Peter will often say, and a couple of other people will often say, is that it's this moment between mobilization and deactivation, immobilization, that will give us the answer of whether or not an experience becomes a blip in the radar or a trauma for life. So whether or not we allow the system to mobilize, to be experienced and expressed, whether or not the system feels like it has the capacity to do that and release and discharge those hormones to come back up, is where we get stuck. Okay, so, but again, all of that mobilizing energy is still here. Okay, so what we have to do is, what naturally will happen is, after we've mobilized, experienced, expressed, and expelled, okay, that activation, then the deactivation follows. I can breathe, and now we're back in restoration. Okay, so that is the stress response cycle. Now, another way we can look at it is the threat alarm cycle as well. Okay, so there is a threat. Okay, there's an alarm through neuroceptive cues. And what happens is then we have the stress hormones, which then creates body-wide neuroanatomical responses, right? And then if we are focusing too much on those body-wide neuroanatomical symptoms, then it creates more alarm, and we can get stuck in this cycle. Okay, so later we're going to practice discharge and pendulation. Okay, so somatic completion. Okay, so somatic completion. This is a term that Dr. Peter Levine created, and I think the tagline of a lot of somatic healing modalities, but in particular somatic experiencing, is completing incomplete experiences. Right? So it's, what can I do now here in the present that I was not able to do back then, that my system was too overwhelmed to do back then? So traumatic symptoms are not caused by the triggering event itself, he says. They stem from the frozen residue of survival energy that had not been resolved or discharged. This residue, and he's talking about the adrenaline, cortisol, and other survival hormones, this residue remains trapped in the nervous system, where it can wreak havoc on our bodies and minds. And this is the stuckness, okay? So he also was quoted by saying, because a lot of clients will come to me with body-wide symptoms, chronic fatigue, okay, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, and they'll wonder, why am I so exhausted? Why am I so depleted? And I think it's important, again, to realize you are down here because you have too much of what's here. Okay, in a way, we can look at your syndromes and your chronic conditions as a mirror, actually, of how much energy your system is trying to contain, because that's how much energy it takes to clamp it down, to suppress it. Okay, when we talk about the dorsal state, the shutdown state, I said earlier that it can be seen as a state of laziness. Okay, this is where we feel lazy, fatigued, we can't do anything, we feel really unproductive. It's important to note that the word lazy is also synonymous with the word indolent. And indolent means to avoid something and to be inactive as a means to avoid pain. Indolent means to avoid action as a means to avoid pain, right? We are down here because we are avoiding pain. We're avoiding feeling. Our system does not have the capacity to be with the charge that's here, okay? Now, really quickly, I just want to read to you a story, okay? And this is from my actual book. This is a story that Peter shares quite a bit, and it's of a client that he worked with named Nancy. So Levine said he had an epiphany moment when creating somatic experiencing while working with a client named Nancy in 1969. In his book, Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, he brought Nancy's story to life. Here's a brief summary. Nancy was 24 years old when she first came to work with Levine and presented a long list of physical and mental conditions she'd been battling since the age of 4. And this is what we see a lot in the somatic world: fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, migraines, anxiety, panic attacks, and agoraphobia, which is fear of leaving home, which this is what we call a management strategy of a symptom. By the time she began her work with Levine, she had exhausted most medical options and had gotten no relief from her symptoms. In their first session, Levine worked with Nancy to help her relax into her body as a resource. During this process, they inadvertently uncovered the root of her symptoms. She'd had a tonsillectomy when she was very young, And before the surgery, the nurses and doctors held her down and administered ether, inducing in her sheer terror and shock. Levine theorized that Nancy's nervous system remained in that state of shock in the years that followed, wanting to escape but feeling trapped. During their session, Nancy was able to imagine running and fleeing from threat by visualizing a tiger ready to attack. After more than 30 minutes of this visualization, Nancy's body was able to muster the impulse to run. At first, so literally in the session, her muscles were bracing and releasing, right? There was the experiencing and expressing and expelling of what had been stuck within her system. At first, this visualization manifested as intense waves of shaking and trembling in Nancy's limbs, and then the movements got softer. She finally had been able to tap into her body's innate defensive response to do in the now what she couldn't do back then. She completed that incomplete response. This profound experience enabled her to renegotiate her trauma, allowing her to move from a feeling of overwhelmed helplessness, which is that shut down state, to a sense of empowerment, right? She was able to rise up again into that fight or flight response, what we call upregulating, and agency. Nancy's symptoms, including the physical ailments that had imprisoned her for decades, resolved after only a few sessions. She later shared that she felt like she was being held by a warm, tingling wave during this process of somatic completion. Now, it's important to note, and Peter said in an interview, and I think it's important to preface as well, this is not the case for everyone, okay? Transformative experiences do not happen this quickly. In a lot of the SE sessions that I do, it takes time. And especially if these are experiences or events that we don't remember, that can take time as well. Okay, so I just want to say that. But I think that it's important to share this just to show you how the system can move through past experiences and renegotiate. So ultimately, what I'm getting to here is that trauma is over when the nervous system says it's over. Okay, and this is what that roadmap feels like, or looks like. So number one, trauma basics. It is important when it comes to trauma healing that we understand the basics and the science of who we are. This gives us greater context. When we talk about the three elements of the nervous system that bring regulation, it's context, choice, and connection. This context, this awareness, this clarity that everything about me makes sense. My symptoms make sense. My pain makes sense. My emotions make sense. My thought patterns make sense. My behaviors, my impulses, it makes sense based on what I went through. This clarity provides so much self-compassion, you guys, so much self-compassion. It gives us grace. It allows ourselves to relate to our symptoms, to our impulses in such a much more supportive way. Okay, and what we're talking about here is interrelational focusing, which is another modality, I guess you could say, that blends in with somatic experiencing created by Dr. Maureen Gallagher, one of my mentors. She's amazing. And what we're talking about is the feeling about the feeling, right? So there's the fear, the constriction. There's the feeling or the sensation is maybe that chronic symptom that you have. And then there's the feeling that you have about that feeling, the frustration, the urgency, the desperation, the fear of it. That feeling about the feeling creates a double layer of dysregulation. And when we know the science, when we recognize that nothing is wrong with us, we're not broken, we don't need fixing, and that we actually, if we stopped resisting what the body is trying to do, it will naturally start to work itself out, then we can begin that process of healing. Okay, so a lot of people will say, like, how do I release my trauma? How do I regulate my nervous system? And it's less about releasing and regulating and more about how we relate to the very natural responses of the system. So we learn about the nervous system. We learn the science of the nervous system. That's step one. Step two is then learning about your unique nervous system. Okay, what is it that how is my system stuck? Okay, in the here and now. What's the chronic state that I'm stuck in? And by the way, I have a nervous system assessment called the 5 Stuck Personalities that you can take to help you understand which state you might be stuck in. Okay, and how can I start to do what I couldn't do back then? right? So maybe I'm shut down because I have a hard time setting, I have a hard time being with anger, right? I have a hard time being with anger, which is necessary for setting boundaries. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, right? So how can I start to set boundaries in my life in a very titrated way, right? A way that feels manageable, not cutting people off, not setting big boundaries, because that could overwhelm the system. That could feel like too much, too fast, too soon. What's a small thing that I can do? Right. And as I experience that somatically in a way that feels tolerable, and then my system is able to take it in, experience it, and know, oh, wow, you did that. And you feel safe afterwards. That starts to create new attentional networks, new experiences, new expectations, and evidence. We're showing the nervous system and the brain that we can do things differently. Okay, so what can we do now that we couldn't do back then? Okay, and then that's how we start to integrate for life. Okay, we find what tools uniquely work for us, and we start to build that resilience to self-heal. And it's important too to know that your nervous system is also going to use unique tools. Okay, there is no blanket approach to nervous system healing. There's no blanket exercise, there's no blanket practice. So, for instance, breath work is something that we often don't do in somatic experiencing because breath work impacts your heart rate variability. And for certain people who have an aversion or a resistance to being in shutdown because shutdown might remind their system of a trauma, we don't want to force the system to go into a more shut down state. Okay, because that could then trigger a certain response, right? Some people find that breath work is incredibly helpful. So that's why it's important, again, to know what your nervous system's needs are. What's the language of your system? What supports it? We call this a regulating resource. And what triggers it, okay? And these are things that you do when you start to do polyvagal mapping, okay, which is nervous system mapping. There are 3 total maps that you can do. And of course, we do those in my programs. Okay, so let's talk about the mobilization response, okay? I first just want to touch on anger here for a moment. So it was in 1912, okay, that Sigmund Freud labeled aggression as a physiological sense of hostile or destructive behavior. Okay, we're now demonizing anger. Destructive of others and self. The somatic lens. We look at aggression as something that provides us with vitality, which means it's life-giving, okay? And it propels us into life. So it's actually healthy aggression. If we were to go back and look at the nervous system map here, I got to go way back, I guess. I thought it was right there. If you see here, okay, see how play, we have some blended states here. Play is a blended state of the nervous system. When we're playing, when we're exercising, when we have excitement, we are actually in a little bit of that sympathetic response. We have that flight energy, that mobilizing energy, or that fight energy, that sympathetic physiological response to give us adrenaline and cortisol, to move, to work out, to excel, to propel, okay, to move us forward. So, going back to where I was, sorry, I'm all over the place. So aggression does the same thing. It propels us into life. It gives us passion. It gives us purpose. It fuels us, okay? Now, through a somatic lens, though, catharsis, which is expression and discharge, Freud believed in intense catharsis. In the somatic world, we do not promote intense catharsis, which is raging, hitting a pillow, doing things at the extreme, forcing the system into a release could actually, what we call, blow out the system. So we do things in a way that is titrated, small baby steps, things that stretch the nervous system, but don't stress it, right? We don't want to overwhelm. We don't want to do anything that feels like too much, too fast, too soon. So tolerable amounts, but this catharsis is required to keep the organism balanced, regulated, and whole, to keep us in homeostasis. Now, Peter centered a lot of his work through ethology, which is the study of wild animals. And the reason that he studied animals in the wild is because animals in the wild, have the same nervous system that us as humans do. right? We talk about the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain. We have the same subconscious, subcortical systems within the brain as animals in the wild. But what animals in the wild do not have is this neocortex, this human brain, this thinking brain. Okay, so we have the mirrored nervous system of animals in the wild. That's why we are often considered human animals. Okay. So animals in the wild, the biological benefits of aggression. Okay, this is what we're talking about here is aggression. The biological benefits is securing and maintaining territory, food, and water, protecting the self, protecting offspring or the pack, and offering reproductive benefits as males fight for mates with the strongest prevailing. Now, as human animals, the biological benefits for us to have healthy aggression is that it allows us to set and maintain boundaries, our vision of territory. I'm actually not okay that you did that. I'm actually not okay that you're talking to my child that way, right? We can maintain boundaries. We do this to defend ourselves or others or our pack, our tribe, our families, our people. We do it to advocate for ourselves, to speak our truth, therefore attracting deeper and healthier connections. And this healthy aggression, again, propels us into life. So when Peter talks about healthy aggression, by the way, when I talk about aggression here, the reason that I'm mentioning aggression is because we often find that when it comes to chronic illness and chronic conditions, it's usually the suppression of terror, fear, but most predominantly aggression. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons that we lack access to aggression in our world today, and that's what we're going to talk about. So Peter coined this term healthy aggression. Okay, which is where we can lean into aggression in three different forms. First of all, we can use it predatorily. We can use it defensive to go out and to get what we want, to get what we need in life. We can use it defensively to protect ourselves, and we can use it motivationally as well. So aggression, okay, it's a Latin joining of ad and gradi, which means to step at. Okay, which figuratively translates to stepping toward something. Aggression helps us to go after what we want. It propels us. Okay, this is propulsion and power that allows us to move forward, to keep going, and to get what we need out of life. Okay, trauma is that fixity where we get stuck, and flow, moving up and down the ladder, that flexibility is what we aim for, which means that we need to be able to move up the ladder as well. So aggression, okay, vitality, power, and life force. These are some of the pillars of somatic work. How can we have more vitality, more life, more power, more life force? Now, what is life force and vitality? Okay, the French call it élan vital, or the vital force, the vital energy. Energy, right? We're mobilized with that sympathetic response. In yogic traditions, prana is a Sanskrit, okay, prana, like pranayama, which is breath work, is a Sanskrit term that translates to life force or vital energy, carried through the breath, through the body, and the greater world around us. Okay, so again, it's this healthy aggression that gives us life and brings our body as an organism into balance. It gives us what we call a biorhythm. Now, often when we talk about nervous system healing, we are talking about remaining calm. Okay, that's kind of like the very surface level, like depiction of nervous system regulation these days is like, how can I calm down? But if you really understand the context of nervous system health, what you'd actually know that it means, how can I ride the waves, right? How can I, it's not about staying up in ventral and staying calm. It's how can I ride the waves, the very natural waves of activation throughout the day without getting stuck. So when we look at the window of tolerance, okay, this is something that therapists often refer to. The window of tolerance is that up and down, okay, the riding the waves of activation throughout the day. So up at the top is hyperarousal, which is fight or flight. Okay, we have excess activation, energy in the form of fight or flight responses. Hypoarousal is more of that dorsal response. Okay, freeze, emotionally flat, lack of energy response. The optimal zone is where we can deal with stress every day. But what happens with trauma is that trauma often shrinks our window of tolerance, right? It becomes more narrow. And what we want to do is take in moments, somatic experiences, body felt experiences where we dip our toes into emotion, into feeling, into sensation, into discomfort in a way that feels tolerable. And by doing that, what happens is you slowly start to expand your window of tolerance. Okay, think about it like you are lifting weights, right? If you haven't been lifting weights, right, and you have very little capacity, okay, to lift, you're not going to go straight into the gym and go for the heaviest weight, right? That's too overwhelming. You start small and then you build up and you build up and you build up. And the nervous system is the same. Okay, we start on what we call the outer edges of your trauma vortex. I know that's a very dramatic word. But your trauma vortex is the vortex that we get stuck in, that we get swept up in when we're stuck in chronic dysregulation, right? And it feels all encompassing. Like I'm always in this vortex. It's all that all that I think about is my anxiety, my symptoms, the negative thoughts, the behaviors, my crappy relationships. It's this, okay? And what we have is what we call a counter vortex, the healing vortex. So we work on building up your healing vortex, which is, can we take a moment through the senses to notice a neuroceptive cue of safety? Yeah, I'm going to be with this rock. Okay. And in somatic healing, we call this stupid simple. It feels stupid and it feels simple, but that's what your system needs. In this moment, I'm going to just explore this rock. Okay. I'm feeling the texture. I actually just noticed I took a breath. That felt nice because I feel like my system has been going. I'm looking at the edges and I'm actually noticing too that there's like almost like black tar. And I'm really curious about that. It's ink. It's ink that's from the inside of this. And now I'm thinking about that ink. I'm remembering that my son actually got that ink all over his hand one day and then got it stuck on his face. And it was the cutest thing. And even as I'm thinking about that now, I'm thinking about him downstairs. I think he was eating a sandwich when I walked up to my office. And I just feel in this moment just a little bit of love and excitement because I get to spend time with him again soon. And now emotions are coming up. Just like that, right? So we start to build the counter vortex, which gives again evidence and experience to the nervous system that we can be with moments of safety, right? And then in the trauma vortex side, right, that's where the work starts. On the trauma vortex side, we work the outer edges of the vortex, right? If I feel like I'm stuck in this fight response, rather than going straight to what that experience is that's keeping you stuck in fight, like for me, it was my assault. When I started working with a somatic therapist, we didn't go straight to the assault because that would overwhelm my system. We started in the shallow end. We started in the outer edges of the trauma vortex and we dipped our toes into anger in a way that felt manageable. Is there a moment recently that really frustrated you or pissed you off? Yeah. When that person cut me off. Yeah, that actually wasn't cool. Right. And as you think about that now and kind of like bring that back to your mind's eye, what do you notice in your body? Well, I'm noticing my hands are clenched. I'm noticing my hands are actually really sweaty. There's heat. Yeah, could we actually just slow down for a moment and just be with that experience and see what happens next? That's where we start. And we do that over and over and over again, building in, getting in those reps, right? Taking our time to be with the rise and fall of activation in the system. It's not about being calm all the time. So this is where we aim to be from fixity, where we're stuck. Okay, we're stuck in one certain part of the nervous system, and I'll use my Hoberman sphere here. This is what we often use to illustrate the nervous system. Okay, fixity is this. I'm stuck here. I'm stuck in dysregulation. I'm stuck in chronic symptoms. I'm stuck in the fear. And we want to get into flow, right? And it happens small. Can I take in a small moment of safety right now? Oh yeah, I can breathe. Whoo, but then I go right back because that's what your system is used to, right? It takes time. So we build a bigger container and a bigger container and a bigger container. Okay. But how do we get wired for survival? Okay. How do we get wired for survival, which is stuck down in the survival states versus aliveness and vitality? So it happens in a number of ways. So first of all, how does healthy aggression get extinguished? Okay, how does our healthy aggression, our healthy life force that we need to propel us and to keep us balanced in flow throughout the system, How does that get extinguished? In a number of ways. So number one is intergenerational trauma. Okay, we can carry on inherited impulses and subconscious beliefs through our cells that dampen our healthy aggression or power, which are then solidified by our lived experiences in childhood. So some examples here. Okay, environments where healthy aggression, such as boundary setting, healthy rupture and repair, which is, let's say, rupture and repair is a disagreement, okay, or drive was not present and was not modeled to you. So let's say, for instance, you grew up in a home where your caregivers, your parents, okay, they never argued ever, or they didn't do it in front of you, even in the most mild ways. What that does is it actually shows your system that it's not okay to argue. It's not okay to have disagreement. And this is actually a very important and necessary part of relational and attachment structures. We need to have rupture and repair because our system needs to know that it's possible to have a rupture and have a repair. Right. So then the next time that you have a disagreement with your boss, your friend, your partner, you're now not shutting down and running away because this feels so terrifying. Right. Or maybe the, boundary setting wasn't modeled to you, okay, wasn't present. And maybe that drive wasn't presented. Social and systemic trauma, okay, ancestral marginalization. So for me, a big response that was passed down within my system was the fawn response. And this is something that I talk about and explore a lot in my book, is the generational line and the what we call the transgenerational inheritance that was passed down from my great-great-great-grandmother to my great-great-grandmother to my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, and me. The 5 lines and generations of us women, there are certain patterns that exist within all of our lives, right? And this, this research can be tied back to what we call epigenetics. There's amazing research by Dr. Rachel Yehuda out of New York's Mount Sinai Hospital. And her research was revolutionary in the space of intergenerational trauma. There's also an incredible book that I have that I recommend to most of my clients who have any kind of intergenerational trauma. And it's called It Didn't Start With You by Dr. Mark Wolin. And it explores the science of the very, very real science of intergenerational trauma. But for instance, there were mice studies that Rachel Yehuda did where they subjected mice to a shock on the foot, claw, I don't know what you call it, anytime there was a smell of cherry blossom. Okay, so they would release the smell of a cherry blossom and then they would mildly shock the mice's foot. And the mice, of course, started to build this fear association of the smell, right? Anytime that the smell would come and there's no shock, the mice would, of course, the nervous system and the physiology, the stress hormones would rise. There would be certain impulses and muscling procedural patterns that happen within the body. And what they found is that multiple generations, not just the descendants, but the immediate descendants, but the grandchildren of these mice, they had the same fear association with this smell, even though they had not been shocked. And what they also found was that the mice's biological olfactory system, which is essentially the structure of the nose, was modified so that they could essentially smell these cherry blossoms in much more intense ways, right? So it was a way that our organisms biologically prime our offspring for threat that we experience ourselves. And the research shows that when it comes to ancestral marginalization, when it comes to racism, slavery, pandemics, things like that, that all gets passed down. Another way that our fight response, our healthy aggression, can be extinguished from an early age is trauma in utero. So trauma in the womb can promote shutdown and dissociation within the child's biology, disrupting development of healthy aggression. So examples of trauma in utero could include, okay, it's not just this, doesn't have to be this, but it could include the mother's exposure to trauma or extreme stress, drugs or toxins in the womb, oxygen deprivation in utero or during birth, prematurity, or medical procedures during pregnancy, labor, or delivery. So as I had mentioned, and the reason why it creates this suppression of anger, okay, is because when we can't fight or flee, the system shuts down, right? So when we're in the womb, we call it's what we call an inescapable attack, right? The organism cannot escape; it cannot fight what is happening. So the best option for the nervous system and the physiology to take is to go into a shutdown, dissociative hibernation state, okay, which disallows us to access some of that healthy anger. So as an example here, when I was born, I was taken from my mother. I kind of hinted at this earlier, because there was methamphetamine found in her system and in my system. And throughout much of her pregnancy, she was a young mother who was dealing with trauma during her pregnancy with me. She was living on food stamps. She was homeless, living in a car. And so I know that I experienced a lot of trauma when I was in the womb, and of course, the subsequent trauma that happened at birth. And that is why my fawn response is so intense, because it is hard for me to have healthy aggression and to set boundaries, or it has been in the past, right? So that was a very strong response that my nervous system was carrying on, right? Let's placate, let's pacify, let's be the peacekeeper, let's not set boundaries. And a lot of that is because I wasn't able to access that healthy aggression. And that also comes with abandonment wounds as well. Okay, another way that it can get extinguished is through developmental trauma. Okay, so this can happen when the conditions necessary for the development of healthy resilience and regulation were interrupted or compromised in those first predominantly 6 or so years of life. Okay, examples of developmental trauma could include ongoing danger, abuse or addictions in the environment, neglect, being unwanted, separation from the mother as an infant or newborn, which interrupts bonding and attachment, recurrent misattunement by the caregiver, which is, through our attachment framework, when the caregiver or attachment figure responds to a child or a baby's dysregulation, like their cries, their anger, with their own dysregulation, like angry that the baby is angry, or shutting down because the baby is angry, or running away because the baby is angry, that creates further dysregulation within the baby itself. So that's called misattunement. Medical procedures in the first year of life, caregiver chronic dysregulation, right? So growing up in an environment where the caregivers themselves were chronically dysregulated. Death of a parent or twin as an infant or child, siblings born close together, divorce while young. Okay, this is predominantly, a lot of this is attachment trauma. Okay, so of course, those are some ways that trauma can impact our ability to have some of that get up and go, to be able to be with the rise of power that is needed to keep the system healthy and flowing and resilient. But also there's the cultural, right? The cultural norms that inhibit healthy aggression. There was a quote that I heard once, I can't remember who it's by, but essentially says that we are in cages of our own making. Okay, so for instance, Freud's description of aggression, the negative connotation that he gave it, I think really plays out in a lot of our culture today, right? We demonize anger, and we only see it in this extreme version of violence and outbursts, but it can be much more subtle, and it shows up in our everyday lives. So for example, Shia is my daughter. I've nursed both of my kiddos, and with both of my kids, there was a certain time around 6 months of age where when I would nurse them, I would start to get beat up. They would punch, they would bite, they would scratch, they would hit. And if you're mom, you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And I would have these little, these little wounds and these battle scars to show for it. But it's around 6 months of life where a baby's body starts to come into what we call its own peripersonal space. Okay, it starts to realize that it has power, that its muscles can contract and release. Okay, and so this is when babies start to, hit their rattles. They like to make noise. They like to bang things. They like to hit. And this is a really important part of development. And so one way that I could have shut down some of that development, or maybe impaired it a little bit, is if she were to hit me and I were to hit her back to teach her that that's not okay. Or if I were to take her off me and say, don't you do that, right? Or if I were to be like, no, and I go put her in the crib. And I'm like, I want nothing to do with you. Right. That sends the subconscious nonverbal signal to this child that anger, this aggression, being with this heat, this energy, this contraction within the muscles is not okay. Also, we often look at our anger as something that is dramatic, right? So for instance, a mama bear, okay? A bear in the wild does not have a cognitive conscious brain, so it's not going to rationalize or conceptualize their fight response, right? So if a bear is in the woods with its cubs and she sees that there's a predator that's circling them, she's not going to stop and think, get up into her brain and be like, oh, should I set a boundary? Am I being too much? Am I being dramatic? No, they're just gonna reject me. No, this bear is going to snarl. She is going to show her teeth. She is going to charge. She's going to bluff. Okay. She's going to do whatever she needs to do to protect herself. And oftentimes we get in our head and we override the ancient, incredibly wise impulses of the body. Gabor Mate often says that anger, he says is the root of most chronic symptoms in our world today, suppressed anger. He says that anger is like a beach ball. The amount of energy that it takes to be with a fight response with anger, it's like pushing a beach ball below water. It is so hard. It requires so much effort. And the further that we push it down, the further it's going to explode. Okay. So again, kind of goes back to Peter's quote about, your chronic symptoms and syndromes can be a mirror or a reflection. You being shut down can be a reflection of how much energy you actually have and that your system needs to release and expel. Other ways that it can get extinguished, and we're coming to an end here, is shame. So healthy shame, okay, it's done from a place of protection and connection. Okay, so shame, let's say that Noah, my little guy right here, he touched the stove, the hot stove, okay? And I'm firm, and I say to him, and I communicate, Noah, we don't do that, okay? We do not do that. I don't want you to hurt yourself. You could hurt yourself, okay? We're not going to do that again, okay? So I get down on his level. I do it from a place of protection and connection, but toxic shame is from a place of belittling, degrading, and humiliation. Noah, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? You know better. God, I just can't stand you right now. Go to your room, right? Where he starts to internalize that it's not that he did something wrong, but that he is inherently wrong. Okay, so we often see in our parenting styles how this toxic shame can come up. And if it's chronic, then it can create toxic shame within our system, which is where, before I jump before this, what happens is when we have this toxic shame, okay, we are taught that it's not okay for us. Well, first of all, growing up in environments where there's things like toxic shame, abuse, violence, danger, we learn as children to shut off our fight or flight response because fighting back as a young child or running away, leaves us in danger. So we will often shut down, which again extinguishes that healthy aggression. So with Noah, for instance, let's say that he experienced that chronically throughout his development. What he'd find later on in life is that he might walk on eggshells in his relationships, learning that it's safer to suppress his authentic self, his life force, than to risk being humiliated or shamed again. He may operate from a place of suppression and disconnection, right? Disconnection is that dorsal state. He'd withdraw from himself. He'd subconsciously associate the physiological activation with threat, which is higher heart rate, heat, bracing, mobilizing of muscles and alertness, which creates an overcoupled response, okay? Shutting down any sympathetic charge in his body, even the healthy ones, right? So anytime he has heat or excitement, right? The good blended states of play, productivity, passion, right? All of those, he will shut it down, okay? He'd be confused then about why he procrastinates all the time, why he isolates, and why he feels so withdrawn. What he couldn't realize is that the antidote and healing medicine to toxic shame and shutdown is actually healthy aggression, the one thing that he's been rejecting. So instead of being shut down, collapsed, and hidden away, he must learn to slowly reconnect with his life force so that he can rise into his innate power. Shame speaks the story of I am bad. Healthy aggression speaks the story of I am powerful. All right, and then just kind of lastly here, another way that healthy aggression gets extinguished is through a boundary rupture. Okay, so anytime there is a boundary of ours that is crossed, what we call a boundary rupture. This could be a physical boundary, an emotional, sexual, energetic, or spiritual, or collective boundary, something experienced as part of a group, or informational. Okay. All right, so rising into our power, okay, coming out of these chronic states of shutdown, we have to learn how to experience, express, and expel. Okay, so what we first want to do, this is kind of the ending here. What we first want to do is build capacity to be in the body from a place of shutdown. Often we'll be like, okay, I just need to work on being with anger or being with the fight response. But what we first have to do is build the ability to be with the body, to be present in a place of shutdown. So we can do this through orienting. Okay, so orienting to our environment through the senses. How can I be present right now? Through containment exercises, which is feeling the body, okay, feeling the container of my body. And I know we're running out of time, so I don't think I'll get too deep into these, but interoception, self-touch, a sensation scavenger hunt. Okay, and then there's also experiencing. Okay, so how can we contain our experiences? Again, not catharsis, but containment. How can I experience those feelings, those emotions and sensations in a way that feels tolerable? And containment means to hold, to house, to embrace, to compose, to calm, to restrain, to regulate, to suppress, to tame. Okay, so we want to move from fixity to flow. Now, some ways that we can experience the sympathetic charge in the body, if it's too much for us to be with anger, is we can first experience it through play, right? What does it feel like to be in my body when I'm playing, when I'm exercising, when I'm doing something fun with my kids? What does it feel like to be in my body when I have passion about something, when I feel productive, when I feel like I want to be protective? Okay. So again, number one, we can't contain what we won't entertain. So instead of resisting the feelings, instead of resisting the emotions, the sensations, the symptoms, we have to be able to entertain it. Okay, we have to have the experiential evidence that we can contain it, we can experience it without being overwhelmed. Number two, it's important to note, and I think this mind shift really helped me. The feeling is not too big, your container or your capacity is too small. And say that again. The feeling is not too big. Your container capacity is too small. So the anger isn't too big. Okay. The shame isn't too big. The sadness, the grief, it's not too big. It's just that our ability to be with it in this moment, in this season of life is too small. Right. So when we recognize it, it's actually about building our capacity to be with it and be with it and be with it. We can contain it in a way where it doesn't overwhelm us. Okay. Number three, contain it without spilling over. Okay, so again, that's why we follow the practice of titration, slow baby steps instead of catharsis. And we want to really lean into natural expression, just seeing what happens next. I said that earlier, right? Can we be in the body and just see what happens next? We don't always want to force something, okay? Because often when we're forcing the tears or the rage or the screaming, we're actually just trying to get out of the experience of our body again. I just want it to be over. I just want it to be fixed. Let's get this over with, rather than growing our capacity to be with it. Okay. And then discharge. Okay. Express and expel. So again, some ways we can do this is through play, passion, productivity, and protection. So this here, I just wanted to, as I was listening to Kate at the beginning, she was talking about something that we talk a lot about in the nervous system space and in somatic healing, which is the feeling about the feeling, interrelational focusing, something we do a lot of in somatic experiencing. So I maybe won't read this, but if you guys want to take a picture of it, I would definitely encourage that. But it talks about how when we have pain symptoms, when we have syndromes, when we have chronic illness, we often have management strategies that can dysregulate or create more intensity. Okay, so if you want to take a picture of this, feel free to. These are some notes that I have that I recently shared with my group, the Body First Healing Program. So I actually just copied it from a post I made a few weeks ago in our community page and just wanted to drop it here for you. All right. So, and I think I'll just say at the very end, okay, again, when we talk about the feeling, the resistance that we have to our symptoms, to our feelings, to our sensations, we actually need to first work with the feeling about the feeling. Okay. If we can work with the energy of the fear of the syndrome first, because again, that's the overcoupled dynamic, by meeting it in a way that it softens or spreads, then you can have a lot more capacity to then work with the management strategy or the symptom. And this is going to make more sense once you read the entire thing. All right, so I know that we've gone long, so I don't think that we're going to be able to get into a pendulation practice, but what I want to do is I can, of course, share with Kate maybe a resource, a link where I did do this actively in a workshop, and if you want to go back and watch that, you definitely can. So with that, I'm just going to close here. Some ways that you all can get a hold of me, or that you can just lean into the work that I do for support. I share a lot on social media, just free resources. I do a lot of guided somatic practices on Instagram, on TikTok. So you can find me on Heal with Britt, or you can go to myhealinghub.com for our offerings, newsletter, and blog. And then this is the first offering actually that we have for my book. My book is available for pre-order. We have not announced this publicly, so I wanted to give you all just kind of that first dibs sneak peek. But the book, Body First Healing, Get Unstuck and Recover from Trauma with Somatic Healing, is available. And we have a promotion that we are providing. So we are going to be doing monthly giveaways up until its release date in March. So that's 6 total monthly giveaways for an offering of your choosing if your name is randomly drawn. So it will be either one chance to win a private 60-minute session with me, or a chance to win free enrollment into my Body First Healing program, which is my 6-month recovery and nervous system regulation program that I've been offering since 2017. So all you'll have to do is just email your purchase receipt or confirmation of the book to Brittany@brittanypiper.com. And then include your preference if your name is drawn. And again, the sooner you buy the book, that actually means that the more months your name will be in the drawing, which means the more chances. So that will be pulled on the 15th of every month. And then the QR code there, of course, is available, which will take you straight to Amazon for the purchase of the book. So I know that we have gone way over, kind of par for the course for me. I feel like I have the hardest time just trying to narrow down stuff. But with that said, I probably am not going to be able to answer questions because I just want to be mindful of time. But what you can do is you can jump over to Instagram. And if you want to send me a message, and maybe just the first thing you can say is Life with Kate. That way I'll be able to flag it because I get a lot of messages every day. I will answer your question in the DMs. So please, please, if you need support, if you have a question, you can reach out to me there. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And I know that Kate said that I'll be closing out. So with that, just thank you for having an open heart and an open mind. I hope that this message today just really spoke to you and gave you any of the support that you needed. So thank you all so much. And Kate, thank you again for the invitation. It's been wonderful. All right. Bye, guys. Thanks so much.